Hamitakiapi, Leampetuashte. Welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Shirley Snavy. The Trump administration says banning Native American mascots violates federal civil rights in the state of New York. The state education department directed schools to consult with local Native leaders and heed concerns over mascots. Massapequa officials refused to change their chief's mascot and have not contacted the local Indigenous community. U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon threatened to cut federal funding to the state schools, calling it an attempt to eliminate the history and culture of Native American tribes. Professor Joseph Pierce, a Cherokee of Stony Brook University, called that laughable.
The version of Native history that they have in mind is a version that they've invented, and it's not the actual history of the Native tribes. It's not the history of genocide of Native peoples. It's not the history of elimination of the Native tribes on Long Island. It's not that history that they're trying to tell. They're trying to tell some fanciful version of Native history that benefits them rather than attend to the actual realities of Native communities on Long Island.
A memorial to the children who died at a South Dakota boarding school took a giant leap towards completion last weekend. Amelia Schaefer was in Rapid City for the unveiling of a sculpture that is central to the project.
The Rapid City Indian Boarding School operated from 1898 to 1933 as part of a nationwide federal initiative to crush Indigenous cultures and assimilate Native youth. The emerging memorial, called Remembering the Children, honors the 50-some children who never made it home from the institution.
It's an honor to stand in front of you today at the site of the Remembering the Children Memorial.
The June 1st sculpture dedication prompted strong emotions, said LaFawn Janice, Oglala Lakota, and a project volunteer.
It's so powerful and impactful, and like the heart-wrenching emotions you feel of celebrating lives, remembering our relatives, we can't really put it into words of how it feels.
Renowned South Dakota artist Dale Lamphere created the life-size sculpture called Tiwahe, which means family in Lakota. It depicts a mother and father in traditional Lakota regalia and their son in a boarding school uniform with his hair cut short. It was created with extensive input from Native elders and youth and can help send a hopeful message, says Janice.
For me personally, it is bringing our community together for healing and education. There's a lot of people who don't know the history of Rapid City, and I feel like that's important for people to learn so that way we can heal together.
Oglala sculptor Derek Santos has another piece soon to be installed.
I have a bronze sculpture which is almost done. I'm just putting the finish touches on. Most important thing for me to get from this whole art project, whoever sees this, they can just kind of take away and continue to tell the story.
A wrenching story, yes, but also one of hope, says Remembering the Children Executive Director Amy Sazu, Sichangu, and Oglala Lakota.
I think some of the things that Indigenous people, that Native people has endured, not just here, but everywhere, this is a big part of that legacy, and probably the most unspoken until the last few years, until Kamloops, until the Pope went to Canada, and now it's an international conversation, but this has been a quiet part of history that Indian people have endured quietly, just like the people on the statue, and you look at their faces. So I hope that it builds understanding. I hope it builds some empathy and bring us together.
From Lakota Homelands for ICT, I'm Amelia Schaefer.
The $2 million memorial is scheduled to be completed and open to the public this fall. North of the Medicine Line, a new administration welcomed the monarch. Polly Denetclaw has this interview about this historic event.
The King of England, King Charles III, made a quick trip to Canada this week to read a speech from the throne. We have some clips from that now.
70 years since the sovereign first opened Parliament. In the time since, Canada has dramatically changed, repatriating its constitution, achieving full independence, and witnessing immense growth. Canada has embraced its British, French, and Indigenous roots and become a bold, ambitious, innovative country that is bilingual, truly multicultural, and committed to reconciliation.
Here to give us more context is Miles Morso, ICT's special correspondent. In your article titled King Charles III Speaks of Truth and Reconciliation in Opening Canadian Parliament, available on ictnews.org, Indigenous people were represented in the room and the speech. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it seemed to be very much something that is part of this Carney government. There seems to be an acknowledgement that we need to have Indigenous people involved in these ceremonies that are representative of what Canada is about. You know, he talked about upon election the three founding peoples, the French, the English, and the first peoples of this country. And so when the King of England started the throne speech, the first thing he did was give a land acknowledgement to the Anishinaabe and Algonquin's people, and then also made a personal note that this was his 20th visit to the country, and the first time as king, but as prince. He'd visited the country 19 times before and had visited with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and mentioned in the throne speech how welcome he was in our Indigenous communities. And so it's something that I think is personal. Within the room as well, we had representatives from the National Indigenous Organizations, Inuit Tapiri Kanatami, Métis National Council, Assembly of First Nations, and numerous other chiefs from across the country, as well as Wab Kinew, who is Premier of Manitoba, and Wab is the first First Nations premier here in Canada. And you could see there was an exchange between King Charles and Premier Kinew during, it was like the meet and greet, shaking hands with the people in the room. And there was this, because usually it's just a hello, but there was an exchange there between the two. And Premier Kinew posted on Facebook and X later that they discussed issues around the environment and the issues around the wildfires that are currently being experienced in Manitoba, and that the king apparently said to Wab Kinew that the world needs Indigenous wisdom. And so it was really symbolic in a lot of ways. Of course, there's a lot of ceremony involved, but the ceremony really had that Indigenous flavor. They were met with a First Nations drum. They stood at the drum when they walked into the foyer of the Senate chambers. And then a young Inuit fiddle player played this beautiful, just heartwarming reel. And you could just see, how people were just moved, young youth. And then an Inuit elder lit the kiluk, which is the traditional fire for the Inuit people. And so these, all well-represented people in the room, in the speech, and in the ceremony as well. Certainly Indigenous people were well represented at this speech from the throne this year. So it was something to see.
Well, thank you so much, Miles, for providing that context for us here. And thank you for joining the ICT Newscast.
Thank you, Polly. Good to talk to you.
Leaders of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe have declared a state of emergency as waves of drugs and violence is overwhelming law enforcement. Amelia Schaefer traveled to Rosebud and joins us now. Welcome, Amelia.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Amelia, what's going on?
So the Rosebud Sioux Tribe is struggling with an increase in methamphetamine usage, fentanyl usage, and other drugs on the reservation, which is in southwestern South Dakota. And this has led to an increase in crime, an increase in violence across the reservation, and the tribe is looking for relief. So on Monday, the 27th of May, the tribe issued a state of emergency, and this came from Rosebud Sioux Tribe President Wooded Knife.
What kind of relief is the tribe looking for?
The tribe is requesting assistance from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and, in general, the Department of the Interior. They're looking for an increase in officers, an increase in personnel, and they're also looking for tribal members and locals to report the crimes that they're seeing to local law enforcement so that the tribe can get a handle on this issue.
Amelia, there are 8 other tribes in South Dakota. Are any of them having similar problems?
They are. 2 years ago, the Oglala Sioux Tribe, which borders the Rosebud Sioux Tribe to the west, they issued a similar state of emergency declaration in November 2023. And since then, there hasn't been much relief provided. The tribe is also struggling with an increase in violence, an increase in drug use, specifically methamphetamine and fentanyl. And we're seeing this across South Dakota as well.
Amelia, thanks for being with us. The Endangered Species Act has played a vital role in ensuring that animals don't go extinct, and part of that process is tribal consultation. A new bill recently introduced could remove it. Daniel Herrera Carbajal has more.
A new proposed bill introduced into the House of Representatives would amend the Endangered Species Act, potentially taking tribal consultation out of the equation. The Endangered Species Amendment Act of 2025 would overhaul the current ESA. The proposed bill would streamline permitting processes and would block judicial review of a removed species from the ESA list for 5 years. The bill was criticized by U.S. Representative Debbie Dingell in a Natural Resources Subcommittee hearing.
Today's legislation, the ESA Amendment Act of 2025, would strip ESA protections, making it harder to protect wildlife. This act delays new listings while fast-tracking removals and narrowly redefines key terms to limit the law's reach.
The Endangered Species Act of 1973 was a bipartisan bill which aimed to protect and recover endangered and threatened species, as well as their ecosystems from the threat of extinction. Section 7 of the ESA requires consultation with federal agencies. The original ESA bill never explicitly included anything about tribal consultation, but Monty Mills, the director of the Native American Law Center at the University of Washington, says through various policies, tribal consultation became part of the endangered species process.
So the Secretary of Interior has issued an order back in the 1990s, Secretarial Order 3206, that directs the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I think NOAA to some degree has joined on to that, to really apply and interpret the Endangered Species Act with respect to the trust duty, with respect for tribal sovereignty. So there have been sort of guidance and changes to, because it's not in the statute, like the way it's been interpreted, they've pushed for that through those secretarial orders.
The current ESA has strict requirements for consultation with federal agencies to determine the impact of any proposed activity on endangered species. It is through consultation where tribal nations have been able to exercise their voice.
The process by which the Fish and Wildlife Service or NOAA or NIMS engages in those Section 7 consultations is by no means perfect, right? There are a lot of challenges around how that works. But at the very least, it does require some like stop and consideration. And if there are going to be effects, they may have to produce what's called a biological opinion, like document and study, like what are the impacts of this action on this species. And those biops have been a basis on which tribes, for example, have been able to challenge the action itself. And that, like the biop opinions here in the Northwest about the impacts on salmon of dam operations, like that's been the way in which the tribes have been able to continue to move change with regard to how water is passed through the dams and how that affects the salmon.
But the ESA has had a complicated legacy in Indian country, with it being seen as both a positive and negative in regards to tribal sovereignty.
The ESA can be both kind of sword and shield for tribes. They can challenge where the agency really isn't doing, affirming their trust duty, recognizing their sovereignty. They can also use the ESA to sort of defend or assert their interests.
U.S. Representative Bruce Websterman, the sponsor of the Amendment Act, said it was time to bring the ESA into the 21st century.
It is time that Congress brings the ESA back to its original intent, which is recovering listed species to the point where they no longer need to be protected, as its current dismal 3% recovery rate is wholly unacceptable. After more than 50 years, it's time that we make changes to bring the ESA into the 21st century.
The ESA Amendment Act has been seen as part of a wider agenda to loosen environmental protection laws to make way for extractive industries.
Well, it's part of a larger effort under this current presidential administration and Congress to sort of tear apart all of the laws that have been fundamental to protecting our environment. And I think we're going to see more attacks like this on other, really the framework of our environmental protection in this country. And I can only imagine that's being done so that industry and other profit driven endeavors don't have to think about these things.
The Endangered Species Act is not broken, it's just inconvenient for certain industry polluters. Any other bill in America that had a 99% success rate, as this legislation does, at keeping the listed species from going extinct would be held up as a model of success. And
The ESA Amendment Act has a ways to go before it would become law. It will need to be approved by both the subcommittee and full committee before it can be considered for a vote in the House. Then it will need to be voted for in the Senate, then signed by the President. For ICT News, Daniel Herrera Carbajal.
Chronic wasting disease has been detected in 36 states. It can be deadly to deer, elk, and moose. Journalism student Addie Glidewell reports from Montana's Flathead Reservation.
Peyton Adams, a biologist for the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes Wildlife Management Program, tests animals for chronic wasting disease. CWD is a fatal brain disease that can be spread to animals.
The only way to test is if you have a dead animal. And we go in with our sample kit and kind of prod around in there.
Natural Resources Department head Rich Jansen Jr. explains how the disease is affecting their homelands.
Chronic wasting disease is a disease that impacts ungulates here in Montana and elsewhere in the United States or Canada or whatever.
Jansen says once the disease reaches a herd, it is very difficult to get rid of.
And it reached us when we were taking samples of tribal hunters, bringing us the heads and the lymph nodes of the mule deer that he had. One of our samples came back positive. And so it impacts, it spreads to other ungulates, and it can impact those herds and cause them to die.
People in this residential neighborhood of Polson, Montana have called the Wildlife Management Program for the CSKT to report deer showing signs of chronic wasting disease. Those signs include dramatic weight loss, stumbling, and lack of fear for people.
We try to take every call very seriously and, treat it as if, it could be another positive and get it tested.
Managers hope to test 150 animals for chronic wasting disease on the Flathead Reservation.
So we want to take care of what we have here to ensure that will remain healthy and vibrant in perpetuity for future generations.
Reporting from the homelands of the Salish, Calypso, and Kasanka people, I am Addie Glidewell with the School of Journalism at the University of Montana.
Wildlife officials are asking people to test harvested meat before eating it. Chronic wasting disease has not been known to infect humans, but researchers fear it could. A summer series for Indigenous families is on the web. I talked with psychologist Anitra Warrior. Dr. Warrior, thanks for joining us on the ICT Newscast.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
I want to talk to you about this exciting webinar series that you're having this summer. How did the idea for this come about?
Thank you. We're definitely excited about it as well. And with our team, we're always looking at ways that we can get services out to our communities because we have such a shortage of providers, for mental health providers across the country. But when we start looking specifically at reservations or specific populations, we're going to see that we have even less providers available. So being able to do our partnership with the Santee Sioux Nation puts us in a really good position to be able to offer things of this nature for free to all of our communities. We want to share information that anyone would be able to understand. Anyone coming off the street or, no matter what grade level will have access to this information as long as they have access to the internet and video. But it's a real down-to-earth approach that's going to be giving quality information that can really support our relatives and support parents. I think as we move forward in our day-to-day lives, there's so much that's coming at us, so much that we have to filter out, and that can make it really difficult for us to have one particular focus and be able to really tap into those strengths that we can utilize with our families. And this is something that we're hoping will help parents, teachers, other professionals be able to support themselves as well as their children.
I think you're a role model. And that people need to see themselves reflected in their counselor, so to speak. And I see on the web that some of the people that I've known that were students are graduating and into this health field, and that's just really exciting to see.
Yes, and thank you so much for your feedback. And I love it. And I've shared this with so many of our younger relatives that when I was in school back in the 1900s, it wasn't uncommon to see people dropping out, dropping out of high school. And now that's more rare. That's something that's rare that we're seeing. So I'm so happy with the growth that our people overall are making.
Mental health is something that I think challenges all of us, even if we think we're doing okay. There might be like a little edgy things, in the back of your mind that are kind of upsetting you. How did you decide what topics to cover in this?
All of the work that we provide in our communities is really driven by the communities. We have certain communities that have had unfortunate events with suicide or suicide clusters. We've seen more happen with bullying, anxiety. So all of the presentation topics that we have that we're presenting have all been guided by the community, just in terms of what we've seen as clinicians providing services within the communities.
Thank you, Dr. Warrior, for joining us on the ICT Newscast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Webinars are Mondays and Wednesdays at noon Central Time. Visit morningstar-counseling.com for more information. An Anishinaabe music group is fusing traditional and contemporary sounds with a message. Erica Aisi has this interview with band member Dylan Bizhiki Jennings.
Bizhiki refers to it's what we recognize as Mashkude Bizhiki, or like a buffalo. And my name, the name that was given to me was Bizhikins, or like young buffalo, and that was given to me by the late Eddie Benton Benet, who was a really great person, an individual that has empowered a lot of our communities to reclaim our way of life, revitalize our language, revitalize our doings, and just be unapologetically who we are as Anishinaabe. So part of that name was to kind of pay homage to, to some of those old timers that really paved the way for us to be able to have the rights and the things that we have today as Indigenous people.
And growing up, how was language a part of your upbringing?
Growing up, there wasn't a ton. To look back now, and I'm not very old, but to look back now to today, where we're at with many of our communities, it's amazing to see all of the different types of programming and all of the different infrastructure that we have in place. All three of our children have the opportunity to attend Ojibwe immersion schools, which obviously I didn't have that opportunity as a kid growing up. And so they're being taught only in our language. So shout out to Wadukadaring in Hayward, or the community of Odawa-Zagaiganing in LCO. That's a big movement going on there, and has created kind of this huge spark all across Ojibwe country.
When I hear the drums in your song and the video, Unbound, it sounds so deeply personal. I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people. Tell me about the significance of some of the drums that you use and some of the other instruments.
To us, the drum is really integral and a very important part of everything that we do, whether it's, there's different types of drums. We have ceremonial drums, we have, hand drums, powwow style drums, and so in those powwow style drums and the kind of the more social drums that we're able to bring out into the public, also carry deep meaning as well, and say that any of those drums, they kind of carry that heartbeat of Mother Earth. And so that drum, or that sound of that drum, is reminiscent of hearing your mother's heartbeat when you're in the womb. And so I was always taught that the drums that you use have kind of like this impact or effect on people, and help touch people in a good way, help heal people. part of making the music that we make, part of it is, we just try to be as creative as possible, and we're, expressing ourselves and making things that we like. But another part of it too was using our platform to normalize our sounds, our style of singing, and our language, where you might not hear all those things in any kind of mainstream setting, but it was important for us to be able to share those things. And like my relatives that we work with, in kind of the language world, will always say, like, that's a big part of it, is as we bring back language in a substantial way, it's becoming normalized, where it's okay to hear Ojibwe our language being spoke, in a supermarket, or in a random place. And that's how we have to look at it, as we're all contributing to the normalization of those things.
Thank you so much for that powerful message.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.